Okay, we are going to be talking about alcohol this week. So, you, we actually have been using alcohol. Humans have actually been using alcohol for forever, for thousands and thousands of years. So, so it's pretty, and almost every culture has an alcohol. It might not be the same one that is in our culture, but almost every culture has its own alcohol. So, um, and and it's kind of interesting. Like, why do people need to drink all the time? But it's part of our culture, and it's part of our history too, that we've been drinking for a long time. Sometimes, many social events include drinking, and that's an important part of the social event. So many weddings, football games, high school parties, which you shouldn't be drinking, but they tend to drink at high school, unfortunately. Getting together, funerals, ladies' night out, all of those involve drinking. And sometimes it can be, just a drink and eating, but in other cultures, it can be just like, in our culture, sometimes we drink a little bit too much. Yeah, I was in Japan, and there really isn't it's kind of a weird drinking culture. In some ways, it's okay to drink a lot, but if you look at teenagers, they almost never drink. That they don't drink very much at all. But like businessmen might go out and then have a lot to drink, and that's socially accepted. So it's interesting to see the difference in culture and drinking. And our history too is really kind of odd with drinking. Back in the 1920s, there was prohibition, so it was illegal to drink. So in some cultures, I lived out in the Midwest, and it's kind of looked down upon a little bit. It's kind of looked down upon, but people did it. So you kind of snuck and you got liquor, but nobody was around when you did it, so you did it at home. But then, you have to go to church and feel bad about it. So each culture is a little bit different in how they handle liquor. And so it's interesting to think about your family history and your culture, and how much alcohol plays a role. I also grew up in Lowell and Massachusetts, and that's a drinking place. So everybody drank a lot, and they had some hard bars there. Some real drinking place. Yeah, and so yeah, it depends on where you're at. Um, in Vermont too, it's kind of interesting to see the culture here with drinking. It's certainly, I think the long winters, I think many people drink, and it's not looked down upon as much as other cultures, as the Midwest. So that's fascinating. So some people drink, some people don't because they don't like the taste. Some people think it's morally wrong, or they don't want to be have a drinking problem. Maybe their family member had a drinking problem and they don't, or it makes them sick. So, and there's lots of different reasons why people drink and not drink. So, yeah, it's good to think about. If you choose to drink, why, and if you choose not to drink, why. Um, but alcohol does contain calories. So it contains 7 calories per gram. So we learned that carbs and protein contain 4 calories per gram. Fats contain 9 calories per gram. So alcohol has more than carbs and protein. So you can gain weight. You can see a lot of people who do drink a lot. They usually have a little bit of a bear belly. So you can gain a lot of weight if you drink too much. And it can affect your body as well in many different ways. So alcohol can come from many different things. It can come from barley and wheat, of course, grapes and wine, the aloe plant. No, not the aloe plant. Oh, what is that? Oh, where does tequila come from? Oh, I can see it in my mind. But you can get tequila from the plants that was. I'll Google it. Yeah, it came to me before I do. Agave plants, and then they were grown out west, and in Mexico too. You can get tequila. You can get sake from a rice. You can get it from vodka from potatoes. You can get, I think you can get whiskey from corn. You can do a lot of different things from corn. So anything that has a sugar to it, in these cases, they all have like a carbohydrate that can be converted into uh, alcohol. And in Vermont, actually, people made hard cider a lot that many people had back, a long time ago. Many people made their own hard cider. So prohibition didn't affect Vermonters very much because they made their own, so it wasn't too harsh. um, so the production of beer and wine and some spirits is really fascinating. And it's done through distillation. So they go through the anaerobic process. And it often involves adding microorganisms. So sometimes yeast, sometimes bacteria to produce the alcohol. Yeast can be added and to turn the sugar into ethanol. And then you can get carbon dioxide. And so just messing around, and probably the really good breweries and the good wineries have their own yeast that they use. So yeast is very important, or whatever microorganism that they use is very important. And so it's a fascinating process. So if you ever have a chance, it's fun to go see how they brew beer or make wine. And if you ever, like now Vermont is the beer capital, probably not the beer capital, but it's a bit, really has some great beer. So there are a lot of tours you can take. We can just travel to different breweries and taste the different beers, and they're very different tasting. So it's interesting to see what a good beer is and what not a good beer is. But in our body, when a person drinks, one of the interesting things is that alcohol can be absorbed right from the stomach. So as soon as you drink, it can go right into your blood system. But most of it occurs in the small intestine. But it also depends on what you eat. So if you haven't eaten anything and then you drank something, you might feel really tipsy quickly. But if you had like a beer with a pizza and chicken wings, you might notice that you're not going to feel the effect. It takes a little bit of time to get the contents out of your stomach if you're eating. So a good idea is to have, if you choose to drink and you're over 21, make sure that you eat something. Then it will help you not get drunk so quickly. So alcohol is actually, and also be aware of serving size. So sometimes you might go to a place and you might order beer. It might be 12 ounces, or it might be 16 ounces, or it might be 20 ounces. So be paying attention to how much is actually in your glass is important too. Also wine too, it could be 5 ounces or 8 ounces. So you might just say, oh, I had a glass of wine, but it could be a giant glass of wine versus a small glass of wine. So having a glass of wine, make sure it's the standard, which is about 5 ounces of wine and about 12 ounces of beer. So alcohol is actually metabolized in 2 steps. There's an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase. So alcohol, but D meaning taking off the hydrogen. Hydrogenase ACE is an enzyme. So it removes the hydrogen. Converts alcohol to an intermediate called acetaldehyde. And then there's a second enzyme called acetaldehyde dehydrogenase that converts that to acetyl-CoA. And then that's actually, when we learn about the Krebs cycle, acetyl-CoA can actually go into our energy cycle, and we can start to get the energy from that. So this reaction takes place in the stomach, but usually it takes place in the liver. So we start off by drinking, and we can probably taste it in our taste buds, and it goes into the stomach, and then we can start to get metabolized a little bit here and get absorbed into the blood system, and then it moves into the small intestine, and that's where much of it is really absorbed. So again, if you have too much food, it's going to slow the digestion into the small intestine. And from the small intestine, it gets absorbed mostly in the small intestine. Then it goes into the blood, and it goes into the liver. And that's where the liver is a really important organ, and it does many different things. And one of them is it metabolizes alcohol, and it also gets rid of toxins too. So, and it also plays a role in making fat and other things. So if you drink too much, it really puts a toll on the liver. So that's not really good. Um, so the presence of these enzymes can play a role in intoxication rate. So women in general have a lower alcohol dehydrogenase than men. So women might be intoxicated a little bit more. And actually, interestingly, Asians have a low level of the second enzyme called acetaldehyde dehydrogenase. And so a lot of people um, kind of interesting. Some people can drink and they're fine, where other people drink and they get sick and they have hangovers, and it just doesn't agree with them. And that is partly to do with the presence of those two enzymes. So Asian people don't have the second enzyme, so they have that intermediate, so they get sick a little bit more. So it's not pleasant. So you might want to pay attention to how your body reacts. And genetically, some people are great at metabolizing alcohol, where others genetically are not. So some people might have the benefit. And so there is a alcoholic gene, or probably many different genes that play a role in how likely a person will be an alcoholic. So if you have alcoholism in your family, you really have to pay attention to how you're reacting to alcohol. So partly it could be social, but definitely it can be biological as well. Okay, so this is your liver. And then this is ethanol, and then it can be converted into acetaldehyde in the liver. But if you drink too much, you go through this system. And this is the acetaldehyde is kind of the unpleasant intermediary. And then you have this enzyme, the ALDH, that converts acetaldehyde into acetate. And then that could be converted into energy or fat. So this is acetaldehyde dehydrogenase. Okay. And this happens in the liver. So you can actually see how much alcohol is in your body by testing your breath. So police often use this, and I think they have some phones now that you can add like a breathalyzer. So I haven't tried it, so I'm not sure how good they are, but that's some people do that. So if your blood alcohol between 0.02 is impaired, where 0.08 depending on the state, is legally intoxicated. Some places it's 0.07, so some places 0.05. So be sure you know what your state is. And obviously don't drink and drive, but yeah, that's very important. And it depends on, so you could be with a buddy and your buddy can be drinking a lot, and you can drink the same amount and they might be sloshed and you might be not so bad. And that depends on whether you're male or female, how big you are, how much you weigh, and how much experience you have. So if you've been drinking a lot, these enzymes, you already have a lot of these enzymes. But if you've never had a beer, probably, I don't know if you ever drank when you're 21 and over. If you drank the first time, you feel really tipsy. But if you drank, maybe it's 10 years later and you're in your 30s, you drink now that have the same glass of wine, you might not be as tipsy. And that's because we have tolerance. We build up tolerance when we have drugs. And alcohol is a drug. So alcohol can affect many different things. It can affect the cortex by impairing judgment. So you might do something stupid if you were drinking. You know, in college, a lot of people hook up with people that they were like, ooh. So they do stupid things. Or you look on YouTube and they do like crazy things because they're drinking. Yeah? So it impairs the judgment. So we have to be careful. And also it affects the forebrain, including the hippocampus. So that plays a role in memory and emotion. So some people, when they drink, might be a little more emotional. Some people get angry. Some people get weepy. So it's good to know, what the people around you or you are. I'm going to switch videos because I only have 15 minutes. Okay, I'll switch another video.